All right. Well, we'll get into the teaching portion of this. So welcome back, one and all. I think we'll start off with a little bit of Daniel Pink, Whole New Mind. I don't know if you guys got around to the book, but I already read chapters 1 and 2 a while ago, but I reread 2, and it was interesting some of the stuff he was saying that connected what we talked about last time, which was the uniqueness, the DNA, voice print, sort of masterpiece. I don't know if you listened to the MP3 or heard any of what I'm talking about.
No, I haven't.
It's all right. Basically, kind of like condense it. I said, you're the only person who is on this earth now who will ever have your DNA. No one who has existed before you will have it. No one after you will exist. No one after you who comes after you who exists will ever have your DNA or your combination of traits, experiences. So you are a masterpiece. You yourself are a monopoly. There's something that only you can give to the world. And then I kind of tied in this whole idea of how nowadays we like to buy an iPod, but after we have it, like we wanted to make it our own, so we customize it with the colorful skins and things like that, ringtones. Like everybody wants customized iPods and cars, and every time you turn on the TV, it's like, have it your way, just for you. But people don't do that with their life. They just take this sort of cookie cutter life, like, oh, I go to school, I get a job, I become this, and then I die. So it's like if we customize our iPods, shouldn't we customize our lives? So it was interesting because he was talking about in chapter 2 this idea of how, he calls it abundance, Asia, and automation. He's like, we've gotten to a place where all the people before us, the knowledge workers they call them, or maybe that's now, like all of this left, he calls it L-directed thinking or left brain thinking. He's like, all of that kind of mentality has gotten us to this point where we have all of this amazing stuff. Abundance of houses, clothes, but we're not happy because there's no meaning to it. So he was saying how nowadays when people want things, it has to have an element of beauty, significance, and uniqueness to it. And I thought that was interesting, just going back to what I was talking about last time with the iPod. He's saying, he was talking about how he bought this. This is interesting to me because I went to architecture school and we studied Michael Graves, an architect. So he was saying how he went to Target and Michael Graves has this whole collection of designed things you can put in your house. And he bought a toilet.
Like a toilet.
Yeah, toilet brush designed by Michael Graves. He was saying even the most mundane things, we want some degree of design element to it, something that sets it apart.
So this architect designs all this crazy.
I mean, he's a real architect, but then he also, I guess, it's like an actor who does commercials. It's like, why would you, Oscar winner? And he's like that kind of guy. I don't know. He wanted to do it's in Target, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Michael, it's like, Michael Graves plate set, or I don't know.
I think I have a laundry bag that's from Target signed by my sister.
Yeah, he was talking about that too. There's like a laundry basket. Yeah, I think he mentioned it.
So yeah, I just think that's interesting. That even, like you're saying, even down to a toilet brush, if it's not something aesthetically pleasing or unique to it, like we don't want it. So we're moving away from the generic to the more specific. So thinking about design, I just, so like I said, I graduated from architecture school. And I don't know if I realized it while I was there or when I graduated, but our design major was called Architecture Focus on Design. And so we did architecture, but there was really an emphasis on people who think about what they think about. Like you had to sit down, they made us sit down and say, what are you thinking about? And how can you think better about what you think about instead of just putting something out there? So we read this, well, I didn't read the book, I want to read it now. I have the second book by this guy, but the book was called The Design of Everyday Things. And that's something they really pushed for. Like we would have to find a bottle cap on the ground and draw it at a big scale on a piece of paper. And then we would sit there and be like, oh yeah, I guess that bottle cap does have all those little ridges on it. So when my finger turns on the cap, it kind of grips. Like you don't think about that stuff until you have to look at it. So the idea that there's nothing around us that is just random, like everything has a sense of purpose and design and intent behind it. So if we relate that back to the masterpiece and monopoly idea, it's like you could say the same thing about our DNA and voice print and iris. Like we have a design element into us, which means there's purpose and intent and meaning behind us. On 35, I think the thing he said was interesting too. He said, people have gone from survival mode, like the day to day, to seeing the bigger picture. And that kind of relates to what I was saying in first class about, we're in this rational tunnel vision, but now we need to move over to this other side as well, the intuitive, the multitask kind of big picture, seeing everything. So then he talks about Asia. And I thought that was fascinating reading the amount of money that people in other countries will work for versus people in the United States. He was saying computer programmers in Russia will work for $600 a month to be that job, whereas over here in America it's like $6,000 a month. So
it's very crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I think he was like some job is $70,000 in the U.S. and they get paid $14,000 in India.
And so the thing that the point he's going for, he's saying in this new age of conceptual thinking where we're going towards, what is going to set you apart from everybody else? Like if the guy in Russia can do your job, why are we going to pay you over here in America to do that job? And then I don't remember if he might not say in this chapter, but it's a similar idea. He's saying, right now you can buy TurboTax for like $30, whereas back in the day you would hire a tax preparer and pay them by the hour. He's saying, nowadays you can go to a doctor or you can get online and try to self-diagnose yourself and get free information. Like, what is setting people apart to where somebody's gonna say, like, I gotta go to Lori Jean, she's got something that nobody else has that can help me. It's like if you're just doing only the left directed thinking, if you're only doing what a computer can do, like, how are you gonna survive? What is it that you have to contribute to the world where people's like, I can only go to Bernard for that? And then I think the thing that he says, maybe later chapter or this one, I can't remember, but he's saying the people who can actually do both are going to be the most successful. People who can do that computer programming type job where it takes that analytical type processing, you're already in high demand because that's what's big right now, internet, web, and all that. But it's like, and if you can add that extra element of something that nobody else can have, like a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter, like that human component, he's like, then you're really going to be way ahead of the curve. Because not only are you doing what's in high demand, you're going to have something else that people's like, wow, not only is it in high demand, but that's also just interesting from a human standpoint.
And it's interesting that both of those organizations, like, y'all saw the Facebook movie. Anyway, their goal is to, like, there's some new application coming out, meaning even with the iPad and iPhone, there's some new application coming out, like, every single day. So they have, like, people working continuous, like a living organism. That's changing and it's growing, and the more stuff on there, you can have your own Facebook email account, and the amount of stuff Google is doing is just ridiculous. It's just like goes on and on for ages.
I'm glad you said it. This is my favorite company to talk about, Google, because Pink writes about that in his other book, Drive, where he says, we're going to talk about this tonight, the idea of autonomy. So he says, Google gives all their workers 20% time, and they say, work on whatever you want. Just, it can't be your regular Google work. Do whatever you want for 20% of the week. So they go and do that, and people end up like fixing bugs to things that have been broken for a long time, or they create Gmail. Like every time I open up Gmail, it's like, this is new. Check this out. Try this, and it's all free. And they're saying that people, he's saying people want this desire to rule over their own life, to be self-directed. And so when you give them that, you're only going to create more creativity versus saying, do this, do this, do this, do that.
You get bored, right?
Yeah. Because everybody's always, like I said, when I was a kid in high school, like I always had ideas flowing and papers I wanted to write. It was like, no, you got to be limited to this. You can only focus on this. And so, yeah, I think, that's like Google. They have a very playful environment. Like you're saying, living organism. The people live there. They have chefs on hand. They play volleyball in the middle of the day. They have like toys all over the place. They have a human environment. And I was watching this CNBC documentary on Google, And so the two guys who started it, they're only like 26 years old.
Are you
They're like
serious?
billionaires, like worth $6 billion or something. 26 years old, went to Yale or Harvard, or one of them was like this close to graduating, and then just quit. It was like, yeah, we're gonna start
It's
Google.
always the Harvard graduates that don't ever graduate. They rule the world. It's ridiculous.
Because they're geniuses. I mean, yeah, and so then, okay, so they hired this other guy who's a lot older than them, and they called him the resident adult. Because they're like, okay, we're having all this fun, but, you know, we want to stay a company too. So we need somebody to kind of make sure money's flowing in and we can keep having all this fun. So they hired this guy. So he went in to have a meeting with the 26-year-old guy, Bryn, I think is his last name. And he said, you know what? I've been thinking about this, we need some more stuff at Google. And so the resident adult guy was like, well, what do we need? He's like, I think we need to start having more parties. And the dude was like, what? He's like, what do you mean we need to have more parties? He's like, we already have more parties than any company I know. He's like, we have more parties than even we should be having. He's like, yeah, I know, but I think we should just have more parties.
Wait, that was the resident adult said that?
No, the
Or
younger
the other
kid.
guys? Oh, okay.
And so they just have this idea, like if people are feeling alive at work, why would they want to go anywhere else? He's like,
That's legitimate.
He's like, we want them at work, so we make it a place where they never want to leave. So they come late, but they stay late. You know, everything is there for them. And so, I mean, I think it makes sense. This guy, and Daniel Pink did an expose on this company in Charlottesville called Medius. And so, I don't know what he read, if he read Pink's book or whatever, but he told his employees came in one day, he's like, okay, you guys don't have to be in the office at any time or a particular time, just get your work done.
That's what I would do if I would have a company.
And so he said, like, for 2 weeks, people were like, okay, this is a joke, ha, you're funny. They just kept coming in 9 to 5, and then finally he's like, look, do not come in at 9 unless you want to. Come in when you want, or don't come in at all. So finally worked its way out. Two people had to quit because they needed that structure. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't take all of that.
What? You can still come at 9 to 5.
I know, that's the thing.
True, that's true.
Can't handle it. People need slave drivers.
It's true. So they finally worked out a system, and the guy's like, yeah, he's like, we're not just saying go crazy. He's like, we have to have, you know, checks and balances and things like that. It's like people are much happier when they are free to be who they are and can move about, you know, be free to move about the cabin, the country. People, when they feel like a human, they're going to perform like a human. But when you treat them like a robot, they're going to perform like a robot. So, yeah, the idea of autonomy, I think, is huge, which we're going to talk about tonight.
Exactly. Get your work done.
In his other book, Drive, he talks about how, he's like, you know, the idea of telemarketing. Why is it that we have telemarketers all in one room? He's like, isn't the whole point of using a telephone that you can be in one place and not the other place and still get your job done? And he's saying there's like all these elderly people who are retired who would love to do that job because they know how to use the phone, maybe not the internet, but they're required to be in the building, and it's a lot harder for them to get up every day and move and be in another place. It's like these people are willing to do this job, but there's just this insistent mentality that you have to have a guy walking behind you. Are you answering the phone? Are you answering the phone? Are you answering the phone? He said, I like what he said. He said, people have this assumption that their employees are passive and inert and lazy. He said, but funny, no boss would ever assume that mentality towards himself. But we think that about other people. Like if we let them do what they're going to do, they're just going to run amok at things and everything's going to go down. It's like, really? Is that how you feel about yourself? So why then do you think that about other people? And he's like, and if you enjoy being autonomous and free and self-directed and, you know, able to do things, why would you then impose the opposite on employees?
Like, if you actually want to be a manager or a leader of an organization or business, like, you have to have some part of you that, like, wants to control things.
Well, we'll get into that, too. The idea of control. So, yeah, I like what he said in A Whole New Mind. He said, you know, people abroad are willing to do what you can do better than you can, and they're willing to do it for less. So, again, what is going to make you in demand in this new world where people are hungry for meaning and hungry for something beyond just the rote, robotic, sort of mechanical way of doing life? Then he talks about John Henry and
Man versus machine.
yeah, and then this other guy, I forgot his name, but he's chess genius, but he lost to this computer. And both of those stories, the kind of theory, the kind of mindset was not like, oh wow, computers can do something better than human beings can do. So then the guy who lost the chess match, he tried to do a rematch with the computer who beat him, and he still lost. But it made me think about, I don't know if you guys ever saw a show used to come on called Smart Guy, but it was about a little 10-year-old kid who was in like high school, but he was like, yeah, he was only 10 years old, but he was in high school because he was a genius. So they had this episode where they had him play this machine in a chess match, and he would win computers for the whole school. So, had all this pressure on him, and his older brother, the sneaky guy, was making bets against his brother because he's like, obviously he's gonna lose or whatever. So the kid lost. Nobody thought he would lose because he's a genius kid. But then, next scene, scenes later in the episode, he finds out his brother, bet against him. And he's like, okay, I'm sorry, man. I just had to get paid. He's like, come on, I'm gonna help you. What can I do to help you? So he tries to play, chess with his younger brother who's far advanced than him. So he's just making these random moves. And he's like, I don't even know how to respond to this. He's like, you're just, wasting my time. Get out of here. But then he's like, wait a minute. That's genius. So then when he plays the computer the next time, he just makes these ridiculous moves that are not allowed, So it's just the idea. Yeah, it's like the computer can only process this. It has all of these, combinations. Like it's gonna be this all the time, and it's gonna be this all the time. So if you can do something that a computer can't do, you can trick it.
Yeah, it's math. It can. Watch it.
So I think
It makes mistakes more valuable too.
Say what?
It makes mistakes more valuable.
Yeah, it's like you can do something that a computer can't. And it's like, so he's saying in this book, we need to get a whole new mind. So that idea, yeah, it seems weird, but the fact that we can make a mistake is something that a computer cannot do, in theory, I guess. And a computer is created by us, so it's only going to follow the parameters that we tell it. I thought it was interesting. He said even software code is they're writing programs where the programs can now write the programs. So it's like you're really going to be put out of a job or out of
writing way faster.
Exactly.
This is ridiculous.
So I think that goes back to the last time I was like, you are a monopoly. Like, what is it that you have? All of this combination of all of your life, talents, gifts, resources, desires, dreams, that is going to make people say, we need this guy, versus the computer programmer or the whatever who can do things that are the accepted, high-paying jobs. So yeah, that was what I took from Pink and tied it in with our lesson. Anybody else? All right.
No, I like what he said about thinking about non-routine things.
Yeah.
It's like, because any job that's routine, eventually, like if you put X in and you get X'd out, whether it's a programmer or, he was even saying doctors. He was like, because all they do literally is process of elimination, which is why I don't really like the whole medical profession unless you're like doing surgery or something. Your everyday doctor is just like, it's like process of elimination. You can put it in. So you have to, I think what's just interesting, just thinking about value-added professions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way we think. We think in our society, like he said, like those logical professions are those that are coveted, not those things that are necessarily value-added.
I like that, value-added. You're going to like the chapter on story, because he talks about how story fits in with the medical profession and how we need to reintroduce storytelling into life. All right, so I'm going to start off. I kind of got to this chart a little bit last time. So still continuing on with the you're made in the image of a unique God, so therefore you are that unique person. As much as God is not compared to anything, you can't be compared to anything mentality. So so this diagram I'm showing how the only thing, okay, we'll start from the top down. So God creates us in his image, lowercase g gods. But then side to side, the only person who can compare to God is God. So similarly, the only person who can compare to you is you. And there's this great story in this book called Play, where these kids, and this coach, he starts a rec hockey team. And out of all the other teams, he's the coach who says, okay, let's just go run through the neighborhoods and let's just have fun. Let's just run. Let's not think about hockey necessarily. So the kids just start doing that. Then after a little while, he takes them to the ice skating rink, and he's like, okay, let's start playing a little bit of hockey now. And he doesn't even give them a real puck yet. He gives them like a stuffed animal or something like that. So once they get the puck, it'll be even easier because they've dealt with something that didn't have the weight. And so then he says, 13 out of the 15 years that this guy coached the team, the kids won the championship. And he said at one of those 2 years when they didn't win, there was a pizza banquet for all the teams. And so his team is sitting at a table, and then the winning team is sitting at a table next to him. So the waitress comes over to his team, and she's like, congratulations, this is so wonderful, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, yeah, we lost. Oh, yeah, those guys won. They got the trophy. But those guys' demeanor was so much more reserved and like somber, even though they won the number one prize. And so then that made me think about, we're raised in our culture and education with so much comparison to one another. Like, how can I be better than the guy next to me or the guy to my right? It's like that classic movie thing where it's like, start college, look to your left, look to your right. When you graduate, these people gonna be here in 4 years. I never understood that because I was like, didn't that mean nobody would be here if everybody's looking to the left and looking to the right? It's just nobody gonna be here. But I guess they had.
I never thought about that.
But I guess they had to say that for every person so they could get the image. But it's like, yeah, we're taught to compare to each other. The pressure from this guy, the pressure from this. Like, it instills fear immediately. Like, you can't even get off the first day of college without being afraid. Like, oh, great, this guy's my competition. Gotta watch him. But the idea of self-comparison, I think, is what's really we should be going for. Because the only person who is worthy to be your opponent is you. And the way I like to think about it is, think about if you could trick yourself, you must be pretty amazing because you know you better than anyone else. If I could hide something from myself, that takes a lot of talent. So this idea that we're comparing to each other, it doesn't even make sense because if we go back to this idea, like literally there is no comparison. Like for me to try to compare myself to Laura Jean, it's like, okay, well, my mom, she lived in Baton Rouge. Where did your mom live? She lived in California. Like there's not even any like reason to do it. It doesn't even make sense to do it because there will be, you can't compare two things that have an infinite qualitative value. But the problem is we've been taught to only think in quantities and numbers and, oh, my state's better than your state, or oh, my team's better than your team. It's like you're only going to be satisfied when you beat yourself. Or like think about the times when you've done something for yourself where you felt real fulfillment because it was an internal thing that only you and yourself knew. Like I remember like just like that hockey story, I remember I was in 9th grade and we had to do the physical fitness test, run mile, run walk. And all my years from kindergarten up till high school, like I didn't even pass the test because I was the overweight kid and the times they didn't even have my weight on the chart. So it's like I was supposed to run at the speed of somebody who weighed 100 whatever pounds, and that was my passing time. I was like, okay, that's never gonna happen. So if anything, I always just, there was a cutoff time, like 15 minutes, like I would make that, but I still didn't get the physical fitness standards. But I remember I was in ninth grade.
Made the 15-minute mark.
I remember one time I came in like 14:59. I saw it on the sheet. I was like, wow. But I remember ninth grade, we had to do the test for PE. And I actually listened to the PE teacher, because they would always be like, okay guys, I know you all want to sprint off and run and just run as fast as you can, but you're just going to burn out. So what you're supposed to do is pace yourself. And then it may not seem like you're doing a lot, but you're really retaining energy. But he would say that all the time, every time, but everybody was just like, shh. Because we have this competitive mentality instilled in us. I got to beat this kid and this kid, even though we're all in different weights and different sizes, and it doesn't matter anyway, because it's not like you're beating somebody who weighs 115 and you're 189. They don't care. It's supposed to be about you, Your little specification on the chart, you're this tall, you're this weight, that's what your goal is. So I remember, I was like, all right, I'm listening to the teacher this time. So I just paced myself, and I remember I clocked in at like 9:40. Still didn't make my whatever personal requirement, but I was happy. I was like, wow, that's the first time I ever got single digits. Like I would always be 10 and up, and I felt really good about that. And the football coaches, they were kind of impressed too. But like even to this day, when I think about this, like that's something I overcame. That's something that I did that nobody else could do. So I think we all have to get into our brain and our hearts, what am I doing that is self-comparison and not outward comparison? Number one, it just doesn't make sense to do it because you're so ridiculously unique that it's just, like I said, there's no reason to do it. It's just nonsensical. And secondly, you're never going to be fulfilled from outward. So I mean, you could apply that to creativity. We're going to go there. So that goes to the idea again of subjective, completely self-contained. The only value that matters is the value within self. So I put you were unlike. You're uncommon, you are unique, DNA specific, there's no copies, you're the original, you're one of a kind. Like I said, you can only compare yourself to yourself. And I just like thinking of your idea, I just like thinking of the idea of each person is his or her own opponent. Like the only match that I could have is me against Bernard. And even, and this shows you again how it's this internal thing. Because even think about it, if I were to copy myself, I would instantly lose value because I'm now a copy. So it has to be just this internal, inner me versus me. Because if I then copy myself, the value, it doesn't even matter because I've copied myself. I'm no longer this unique person anymore. So the only true foe is me versus me internally. Bernard overcoming Bernard.
So to make this fit into Laura Jean's little brain, so like when I paint over that painting of my grandma, I can compare like myself to myself because I can be like, how about
your own personal best? Yeah.
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 It's like I equivalent to trying to achieve your own personal best.
Okay.
So even if in his example, even if he didn't measure up to the chart, he improved, 4 minutes, on himself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so, such and such may be this way, or such and such should be that way. And you're like, what does that matter to me? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. But if I've improved, and I know that that's the best that I could have done, or moving towards the best that I've done, like that's what matters. Because what's the point of comparing you to somebody else? They have their own skills, abilities, talents, natural, whatever.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the subjective. I guess I have to jump to this chart right quick. But I put here, I said we're all fruit. So we're all equal. Like I can't.
Apple.
Ebony's an apple. I'm a watermelon. Fine, you can be the watermelon. See, I can't be the watermelon at the same time as you.
I know.
Or even if I was,
Be the green bell pepper. Is that what it is?
I don't know. I just used colors and made it look
No,
colorful.
I think I would be a pineapple.
But think about it. Like the phrase that you were taught in school, you can't add this to this. It's like adding apples and oranges. And I used to never really get that statement until I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, because in order to add the two together, you would have to call it an apple orange. Like there's no, quantitatively, it's impossible to add an apple and an orange because they're two separate things, two entities that are completely different from one another. But they're both fruit. So when it comes to equality of human beings, we're all fruit. We're all the same value. But within each of us is a unique characteristic that only applies to us. So I can't eat an apple and say, how does this apple taste compared to that lemon? There, like I said, there just literally is no comparison. I can say, well, it's kind of sweeter. Yeah, I mean, but that's distinctly attributed to that apple, you know? An apple by nature is sweet, or a lemon by nature is sour. There's just no comparison. I mean, there's no other way to really put it, I think, than just literally there's no comparison. So this is all going to tie into art in a second. So I put here mass production, industrial revolution. I think that same method became applied to people themselves. So now we treat each other in a very generalistic way. Like the way kids go to school. It's just, how many kids can we get into a classroom? All right, good. Maximize that. How many, make sure everybody gets through the schools. It's not about attending to each student's personal needs and like, what does this kid need and how does he need it? We don't have time for that. We don't have time. We just got to get these kids through. And so then we treat them like mass-produced products. Just put them in a box, ship them out to the world, open them up, and then when things start going bad in the world, like, well, what's happening? It's like, well, you didn't treat them with value. You just told them they were robots and machines and you shipped them through. So how do you expect them to act once they go out into the world? So like that poem I did the first day, one of the lines I said, man was not manufactured. He's a created and crafted masterpiece. And that little sticker that I found, I didn't even think about it till later, but it says music industry with the word industry crossed out and community written. But just even that word industry and industrial, even art and music have become this industry or industrial thing versus a beautiful or creative thing or subjective thing. Oh yeah, the other line I had in the poem said, just because you have to go, even if you work in a factory, that doesn't make you a product. Like just because the method of things you're doing in the world requires you to create and produce material things, that doesn't mean that you yourself should then become as that same thing. Let me see. Oh yeah. So I told you I was going to be quoting the Cosby Show. So there's this one episode where Claire Huxtable is in her office with one of her good friends who's from another law firm. So they're just trying to one up each other. It's like, oh yeah, we took that case. Oh yeah, well we did that. Oh yeah, we're having our office renovated, blah, blah, blah. So then finally her friend is like, oh, we just got this painting in my office. And then Clara's like, oh, that's a great painting. Yeah, our office has that too. Our office has that one. She's like, oh, really? You guys have the print? She's like, no, we have the original. So just that idea of once something becomes copied, it no longer has value. Like the more and more and more and more and more of something there is, the less we want it. Rarity, scarcity makes things more valuable. Like when an artist dies, we're like, oh, I gotta buy his CDs because he's no longer living. So those things are now all of a sudden worth a lot more. The fact that there's like, the Hope diamond, one diamond in all of existence that people covet, is because there's only one. And that's how we should think of ourselves. There's only one of me. I'm a scarce resource. You better value me in that way. When I come into the job, you better treat me as if I am the Hope Diamond. I'm this scarce resource because I am.
People need to take that philosophy on life.
I know. They do. Was I just thinking about that? Yeah, there's just something about, people talk about a one-of-a-kind painting. or I guess more. I'm thinking also related to. I mean, just look at like he was talking about in the book, the abundance, the amount of stuff that we have, the things we can get so easily. Like there's no longer just an outlet store in one city. They're all over the country. I think about the idea of a home cooked meal versus fast food. Fast food, the whole point is we need to make a lot of it because we have to do it fast. And usually the food is not really touched by human hands. It's touched by a robot or a metal. But like you think about a home cooked meal, like somebody had to go to their garden and touch it with their hands and clean it and make it and cook it. Like everybody knows the difference between a home cooked meal and a fast food meal. So a lot of things that we do, music, art, food, or whatever, has become this fast food mentality versus the home cooked. Like we don't treat people as home cooked meals. We treat them like fast food. We don't treat them with that sense of time and quality and really attending to like the unique attributes. So now we're going to talk about fear. We're going to talk a lot about fear because I think this is what most people in general, but like really artists deal with. So in this part, I have, well, the title of this is In Fear and then Inferior. We'll talk about that. So I think the first thing we have to talk about is this part and whole relationship. So each one of us, we're unique, but we fit into a larger context of everybody. So we always are relating the unique, subjective masterpiece, completely original, to other people who are likewise, but usually we're interacting with them on a larger collective group. So that's humans to the rest of humans. That's employee to coworker, artist to audience, student to classmate. So this is me, and then this is the rest of you guys. So, let's see, where did I go from there? I'll go to the big chart. So I think what's happened is we have to look at fear. I think a lot of what we do as people is operated out of fear versus being operated out of love. And we're going to talk about that, what's the word? The duality a lot. So I would consider, we'll just start on the fear side, which I call the lie, and I call operating out of love the truth. So the interesting thing to me about this diagram is, really if you just isolated one quadrant, you could take this idea of you, any of you, or me being in the middle, and everybody else in the world is the person to your left or your right. Like I said in college, look to your left, look to your right, this is your competition. So you can take any one of these quadrants, and it's just all about the motivation that you apply behind it. So up here I have uniform, conform, norm, compare, competition, as I said. So let's look at this one. Here's me in the middle, and there's everybody else on the outside of me. And this is looking at the whole. So if you're looking at this mentality that's driven out of fear, on this end of the spectrum, it's this idea of you don't want to stand out. Just don't rock the boat. Just do what everybody else does, and you'll get through life just fine. So there's this fear of being seen or stepping out. You're taught to just be a generic person, a robot. You're one of my lines in the poem is like, you need somebody to see your face instead of just being in a sea of faces. So I think that's one thing. Like I said on the other teaching, like there's been an attack on the individuality, and we're taught to just fit in with the mold. So that's one end of the spectrum. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have this idea of not fitting in, but actually being, actually stepping out. And it's what I call, the idea of celebrity or pride or better than. Not that being a celebrity is bad, but it's just this facade that you have to constantly keep up. Like, oh, there's Bernard, he's cool. Like, hey, what are you doing, Bernard? Hey, yeah. Like, you're always putting on a front for somebody because you can't ever not be cool when you're seen. So it's just a lot of stress and work. So if you look at the truth side, which is out of love, I put unique self-comparison or no comparison. So relating this one to this one, it's the same idea, but there's a difference. So here, you're taught the same thing. Be like everybody else, but it's about equality, value, humanity, the sameness. So the problem with this one is that it's telling you to be like everybody else, but in a homogenous way, like lose your own personal value. Here we're saying, yeah, be like everybody else. You're not better than me, and I'm not lower than you. We're all equal, but we're still unique. Going back to the fruit idea. We're all fruit, but we're all our own kind of fruit. So that's the problem with this one. And I think that's what's happening, now, where people are driven out of fear rather than driven out of love. Whereas here it's like, don't value difference. Value uniformity, conformity, monotony. Here it's like, value everybody's difference and remember we're all equal. So if I go to an open mic, I can't be like, yeah, I'm the bomb, I need to go up to the front, let me just move up to the front of the stage here and perform. It's like, well, what about the rest of these people who want to express themselves? They're equal too. Yes, you have something unique to express, but guess what? If you were in their shoes, oh yeah, I have something unique. Like, so we're all in our own subjective little God universe have a uniqueness, but we're all equal. So then, comparing this one to this one, the difference is, like I said in the last session, being yourself, when you're yourself, you're just able to rest. There's no trying. You just walk in the door and you are. Like, oh, there's Bernard. Yeah, he's the man just because. Like, I'm not trying to keep up this facade. Or every time I go to an open mic, I'm not like, okay, I got to do some cool poem for people because, I got to stay up here on top or otherwise I'm not going to be cool. Like, I'll just be myself. So this side, all fear-driven, all anxiety, all trying to do something, always either fitting in or stepping out, and it's always out of fear. Here, you're fitting in and stepping out, but it's out of peace and relaxation and love and not trying. So I think that's helpful for artists because...
And by not trying, you don't necessarily mean not working hard
Yeah.
at who you are, but...
Not, I guess the word
Not being
people...
overzealous.
Striving is the word.
Like not trying to be something that you aren't.
Yeah. Like you're not, it's like this chair. This chair is not trying to be a chair. It just is a chair. But if this chair was like, oh, I want to be a couch, like you would instantly notice if this chair was trying to be a couch, like, okay, chair, you're obviously not a couch. That idea of somebody trying to be something that they're not.
But as a chair, it works hard being a chair when somebody's sitting in it.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this whole idea of,
I mean, actually, there was some thought into that going, being a chair.
Yeah, and that's a good point you guys bring up because I was talking with one of my friends. Well, I guess we're friends. We just met, but I went to my friend's wedding in Ohio, and I got to stay with her friends or family, and we got into all this conversation about art, and she's like, I don't know how to balance this because I want to help people with art, and but at the same time, like they got to support themselves. And so we were talking about the value of creativity, how it's less in our culture. And so I was telling her, I was like, yeah, when I sit down and write a poem, like I'm working hard. Like it's this great thing about being a creative person. Like you're working hard, but you're really not. Like is it work? Is it play? Is it both? It was like, yeah, I'm taking the time to sit down, put my pen to the paper, think of words, make them work, make the metaphors interweave, practice it, get in front of people, but to, the mentality where the scientist is up here and the actor is down here, that's nothing. It's like, oh, you just memorize lines, you just write words, oh, you draw pictures, oh, what are we going to do with paint? Like, since it's not valued, I think creativity often looks like it's not work. Oh, you're just playing around. When are you going to get to do some real work? So, like you're saying about the chair, like, yeah, that chair is working hard to be the chair, but that's what it's made to do too. And I think that's where the sort of balance of working hard, but since it's what you're made to do, so you don't really have to work hard. Like the two of those are always playing off each other. And yeah, I think like everything has an extreme. Like you can be working hard to the point where it's now bitterness and hate. Like, yeah, I work on these poems. Like you could be getting that bitter mentality. Like, yeah, I do all this poem. Nobody pay attention to me. All I, just starving artist. Blah 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 blah. Where somebody else could be slaving over poems, never getting paid, going around the country, getting paid $50 to do a set, and they're just loving it. Like, man, all I need is a sandwich and a place to stay, and I'll do your show. So I think, yeah, there's always that, tug of war. But yeah, I didn't even notice till I made the chart today, but I said, in this chart, we're taught to either be this robot or this other person. So I think that kind of related to the, like here, when you're taught to conform, you're turned into this mindless minion like everyone else, a robot. No, you're not above them, you're not below them. We're all just equal. We're all just robots. We're all just conform to the same mentality. Don't rock the boat. Don't try to be seen. Just quietly move under the radar. And then here, you're taught to be somebody else. Like that, you're trying to be that celebrity. Hey, what's, hey, just moving. Hey, I'm gonna catch you. And then you're like, like you want to go sit down because you're so tired.
Working hard to stick out as opposed to just being yourself.
Exactly. So I think that's what this one is. You're taught to be this other person that you're not really. So I just found that connection between those two. So let's see. I guess I could kind of segue into. Sometimes it's hard to know where to go. Stuff moves in circles, not always lines.
I'm fascinated by this intrinsic extrinsic.
All right, yeah, that's kind of where I want to go. Okay, so I love this. This is a lot about Daniel Pink's Drive book is about. So being intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated, or I don't know if everybody knows his words, but intrinsic from the inside, doing something for its own value. You do it because the thing itself is the reward. Versus extrinsic is where you do something because you feel external pressure and you think you're going to get some type of outward reward. So in the beginning of the book, he talks about, I think it's like these sea otters who scientists were testing them with different treats and rewards to see if they would like go through a hoop. Or maybe this was, I don't know, there's a bunch of, I can't remember. Anyway, some animal doing some type of experiment where the scientists was rewarding them, and then on like the last trial, there was no reward, but the animal did it anyway. And then there was like, oh, this is a brand new hypothesis. What if the reward was the task of completing the task itself? And so then, he went on from that point. But I think the idea of intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic is hugely important. And I think most people and artists operate out of this. Extrinsic, external. So under there I put fear, obligation, pressure, what people think about you. And on intrinsic I put freedom, choice, sheer desire, what God thinks about you. And that truth is constant, never changing. What people think about you is flaky, shaky for the moment. So imagine this person here is on stage, the artist, and all these are fans. So if I step on stage and I'm performing, and I'm extrinsically motivated, I perform because every time I perform, I love the praise of the crowd, and I love hearing what they have to say about my poems. That, you can do that, but what's going to happen is you're never going to know who you are. Because if I'm in Raleigh one night and I'm performing and the crowd loved it, yeah, thank you, Raleigh, I'll see y'all next year, I'll be making a tour. I go down to Florida the next night, it's like 3 people, and it's like crickets. all of a sudden my whole self-worth and inside of how I think about myself goes down. Oh, I guess I'm really not an artist. People didn't really respond to my poem like they did in Raleigh. It's like you're going to tour around the country from tour to tour to tour to tour, going up, going down, because your sense of who you are is based upon how the crowd reacts that night. So that's external. You're waiting for some type of response from them. Whereas on the inside, you're doing this solely for the purpose and pleasure of doing what it is. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy the praise. Like, I love when I step on stage when people are like, yeah, Bernard's coming. Like, I love that. I'm not gonna say like that's not a good feeling, but if people stop doing that, I'm not gonna stop performing. Cause like me, I'm sitting in my car. Like, I literally will sit in my car and just be going through poems in my head, saying them out loud, performing them for myself.
Can I read some of your poems? Do you have them with you?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I have some with me. I can
You
get
gotta
some
hear
copies.
'em. Have you ever heard him?
That's right. You
Oh,
you
no.
came
You
late.
gotta hear it.
You came late for the first one. I performed one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe
Very
let's see.
auditory.
I definitely want to do more here because there's one I want to do that's about actors and doctors. Maybe I'll do that tonight. But that's why you gotta come to the poetry jams too. I told you. But yeah, like I'm sitting in my room, looking in the mirror, in the car, walking down the street. Like I just enjoy poetry. So I will just read it, recite it, perform for myself, better myself. Like I said, self-comparison, be work, oh yeah, I need to change that line. It's like an audience of 0 people. And I could be doing it because I just like how it makes me feel. So when you're driven by that intrinsic desire, you could go to the crowd of 1 people, crowd of 100 people, crowd of no people, and like your identity is not going to be changing because you're performing because you enjoy it. Like I said, the inside out. So I have these charts somewhere else too coming up, but this whole idea of inside out versus outside in. Let me go to that chart. So when stuff is coming at you from the outside, you've got fear, situations, people's expectations, problems, people's opinion, pressure. Like you can't make good art out of that. You really cannot make good art out of that because it's always going to be contingent upon what the other person thinks. And like I was telling somebody last night, I was like, the only person that goes home with you at night, theoretically, is you. Like I can go out and do this great show and blow everybody away, but the only person who, when I wake up, is in my head is me. It's like, Bernard, did I enjoy that? No, Bernard, I didn't really like doing that poem, but the crowd likes it. But the crowd is not here right now. I know, Bernard, that's why you should have done what you wanted. It's like you can have this whole internal dialogue because you are the only one in the end who really has to deal with you. These other people, they're just gone home, gone to work, doing what they're going to do. I just thought of something that goes with this. Pressure, fear. Oh yeah, there's this great psychological experiment in Daniel Pink's first book, Drive. I'm gonna keep promoting that book so everybody reads it. Okay, so he did this. There was an experiment where they had like 30 artists, and they brought the artists to this panel, and they said, we want you to select 15 commissioned works that you were paid for, and then 15 non-commissioned works that you just painted, whenever. So they had these artists post up all their paintings in some gallery display, and the jurors went by, and they looked at them all, and they ranked them and said, now all of the paintings, by the artists, individual artists, were exceptional in quality and creativity. But there was something just different about these over here. Like we can't put our finger on it. It's just, I can't tell you what it is. It's just something different. I like these better. And every time they were like, they always picked the ones that the artist just created because they felt like creating. Because there was not this pressure of, the expectations of what the patron is paying me. Oh, do you like this stroke? Like there's always this people in your head, I think. Whenever you're writing a poem or you're painting, there's always like people in your head telling, like we imagine these people like, yeah, that's stupid, that's dumb. It's like you gotta crush those people in your head. I'm in this drama group, they call it cops in the head. Like there's these cops who are telling you, even if it's just like a universal kind of belief. It may not be a specific incident that happened. You're like, your mom may not have said, that's a stupid painting. It's just maybe this idea in your head like, yeah, artists aren't important, so I should stop painting right now. But it's like the idea that art made detached from other people's expectations is always going to be the best. Because if you're making stuff always thinking about what other people are going to, you're always connected to them. Like you're never going to be able to go free because you're going to, and that's what happens. That's what happens with,
All the time.
yeah, all this stuff on the radio nowadays. Oh yeah, that's the story I was thinking about. But Pink one was good too. Okay, so you guys know Sarah Bareilles. I'm not gonna write you a love song.
Yeah,
So I saw her here a few years ago. So she told the story behind that. She's like, okay, I was on my record label, and I kept bringing them my material for my new album, and they were like, man, it's pretty good, but we need you to go back and get that hit. You know, just go back, come back in a little bit, and let us know when you got that hit. So she came back again. It's like, okay, guys, here's my heart and soul, you know, on paper and music. Man, we don't know if this is gonna sell. We need something, you know. Just you haven't hit it yet. Go back. So she said, finally, she went back. I was like, screw you guys. I'm doing whatever I want. I don't care if you like this or don't like it. And then that whole song was written out of that. Like, I'm not gonna write you a song because you want it, because you say it's make or break. And like I didn't even know that's what the song was about until she explained it. But the whole idea of not caring, and this is kind of related to that idea of the chair, where the word "not trying" could be taken the wrong way. But not caring, I think, is more in line with the childlikeness. Like little kids, they don't care what you think about their stuff. They're like the same person who I stayed with in Ohio. Her husband was saying, you know, like she's like, our little granddaughter, she'll come in there and have this scribble on the paper, and we'd be like, what's that, Abby? She's like, it's a dog. You know, like little kids don't care. He said, you know, when we grow up and become adults, we're the ones who are like, no, a dog has 4 legs and an eyes. Like we're the ones who, you know, put inhibitions on them. And then she's like, nope, that's a dog. Or it's like that one little cartoon. It's like a little boy was drawing a picture of God, and the teacher asked, you know, what are you drawing? He's like, I'm drawing God. She's like, nobody can do that, Billy. Nobody knows what God looks like. He said, well, they will in a few minutes.
That's awesome.
Like that whole idea of the
God.
childlikeness of little kids, they just don't care. I mean, speaking of drawing, I was at another TED Talks, and the guy had the audience bring out sheets of paper, and he's like, I want you to do a self-portrait. And so he had everybody draw it for like a minute, and he says, you know, most of you guys probably held back because, you know, we're taught as we grow older to be more conscious of what other people think of us. Whereas little kids, they could care less. I mean, that's what I love about kids. They just tell the truth, and they just do what they want to do. And there's this other movie called Grace of My Heart. This is about this woman who's a songwriter, and she ends up marrying this guy who's her producer, and he's making this album. And so they're interviewing him on the beach, and they're like, what's this new album about? And he was like, you know, remember when you were a little kid and you would just walk around the house and sing songs? Didn't have any particular meaning or purpose, but it was just songs that you sang because you liked them and it made you feel good. It's like, that's what we're going for in this album. And I think that's what people need to get back to. I have on here record labels, you know, related to the whole Bareilles story. I just don't even understand how people can sign to record labels nowadays, because you might as well just give up any kind of creative freedom, because they want that hit. They want what sells. They know what people, they got all the demographic in the charts. We need to hit this. There was an article in The Hook of a local songwriter, and he said he had signed to a label, and now this was his departure from the label because he just wanted to get back to the music. He said, I would be sitting in a room with 4 people telling me why my CD had to have this kind of font, so when it sat next to Usher's CD, people would pick it up. He's like, I was just tired of that. I just wanted to make music. I was like, yeah, that seems right. I mean, in another context, but it relates to creativity too. It's like, have you guys heard that, what's it called? I always mess up. I need to memorize this story, but it's pretty much about a guy who's on vacation. He's a businessman, and he's just out on the beach. He sees this native guy fishing, so he's intrigued. He goes, talks to the guy, and says, oh, you know, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you know, what's going on? He's like, well, you know, I like to come out here and fish, because I can catch enough fish to feed me and my family. I have some left over to sell, maybe make some money. But it's great because it's just enough to feed me. It's enough to make a little extra for the things I like to buy, and it gives me time to come out here with my son and we fish together and we spend time. And the guy's like, "Oh, that's cool." He's like, "Have you ever thought about getting a second boat?" And so the native guy's like, "Well, why would I want to do that?" "Well, because then you can catch more fish." He's like, "Okay, why would I want to do that?" "Well, because then after you caught more fish, you could sell those fish. Then you could buy a whole fleet of boats and hire people to man those fleets of boats." And the guy was like, "Okay, great. Why do I want to do that?" He's like, "Because then after you get those fleet of boats, you could sell it and get a whole ship. And then you could catch more fish than you ever wanted. And then your company could go 500, in the Fortune 500. You could be on the stock market, and then you can sell your stocks and bonds to shareholders." And the guy's like, "Why would you want to do that?" He's like, "Well, then you could retire to an island where you could fish all day with your son." And the guy's like, "Thank you, my point." And get out. And it's this whole idea that people create this middleman to get to where they're already at. So people like making music. They like painting. This is what they want to do. And then somebody comes along and is like, "Hey, how about signing your name here and doing all this?" And it sounds all great. Then come to find out, they just end up right back where they started. It's like, I should have just done this the way I wanted to do it rather than trying to get you guys to pay me. So I think artists, creative people, just need to do what they want to do from the get-go. Like if you are not making money at your art, but you're happy doing it, then that's what you need to do. Because then all of a sudden, when it becomes this obligation, it's no longer fun. Another thing Pink talks about in Drive, how you can turn work into play and play into work. So he's saying, there's two good stories actually. Somebody told me this other one. But he said there's these Englishmen, they'll get up real early on a Saturday morning to drive these horse carriages, and they pay lots of money to do it. He said, but then if you were to ask those same Englishmen, what if I gave you, $1,000 to get up on Saturday and go do this activity? He's like, all of a sudden it becomes a burden. It becomes a task, because now it's contingent upon money. He's like, when things become what ifs versus now that's, he's saying so if you say, what if I give you money, all of a sudden becomes a job. But if you let somebody do something because they want to do it, and then you say, oh, now that you've done that, guess what? You also get paid. He's like, that's the way you should approach stuff. Let people do things for the sheer pleasure of them, and then pay them. Oh yeah, so then this girl who I met a couple weeks ago, she told me this story, and I gotta find it. She said there was this guy, he was asleep in his house, and then he heard all this banging like midnight. And so he went downstairs and was like some neighborhood kids banging on the trash cans right next to his house. And he's like, most people would have just approached it and get out of my house. But him understanding psychology, human psychology, he said something like, oh man, guys, thanks so much for playing. Can you guys come back tomorrow and I'll pay you $10 to play? So the kids were like, oh yeah, great. So they left, they came back, so he paid them. And then the next night they came back and he's like, oh, you know what guys, I only got $5 today. Can I pay you just the $5 and I'll give you the other half tomorrow? And they're like, all right, well, okay. So they played, and then they came back the next night and he was like, you know what guys, I don't have any money on me. All I got is like this $1. And all of a sudden he goes, man, you think we coming out here to play for $1? Man, get up out of here.
That's awesome.
So just this whole idea of once you make stuff contingent upon money, people's whole shift changes. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. What do you think I am?
That's hilarious.
I know, that's brilliant. Like, I want to remember stuff like that and use it, for my benefit. But yeah, just being internally motivated. Let's see. So that's intrinsic. There's this great article. Well, there's a couple articles. I posted on our little board over there. But Evan sent me this great article, XL Recordings. They have Adele, some other artists, I guess European rapper, Dizzy Rascal. And it was talking about the autonomy of the record label and how they let their artists do what best works for them as individuals. So they said something about Adele was like, yeah, I don't like playing festivals. And they were like, okay, don't play festivals then. Like, just do what you like to do. And like, most record labels would never have that. If like you're playing festivals, you're playing concerts, you're selling CDs, you're selling DVDs, you're selling T-shirts, you're selling toothbrushes, if we tell you, because we're trying to make money. But he's like, why not let the artists do what they do best? Like, why are we forcing people to do things that they're not interested in doing or necessarily going to do well? Because could you imagine even something as amazing as music and as fun as music can be turned into a chore if you're like, I hate playing these festivals, but I got to, like, the whole time just sitting up there trying to get through the moment. It's very strange because you would never think you would do that. But once you're put in the context of something you don't enjoy, like those drummers, on the trash cans, all of a sudden it becomes a chore. But then Evan sent me this thing about Pixar, and he was saying, Pixar, I'm going to use this article for another concept later, but dealing with the intrinsic and the extrinsic again, it talks about how there's two types of perfectionism. And he's like, there's good perfectionism and there's bad perfectionism. Bad perfectionism is when you're always thinking, what are people going to think about this? How are they going to respond? Am I doing what I think people are expecting me? He's like, there's a good perfectionist. There's a good perfectionism in terms of when you're always, like we got said at the beginning, self-comparison. Like, how can we make this movie better? How can we make it more enjoyable for the crowd or for the audience? Not so they can pay more money, but just for that sheer sharing pleasure. And, just constantly bettering yourself and making sure things are up to your own personal standards is what they said the good perfectionism was. And I remember there's this great documentary called The Story of Pixar. And they made Toy Story 1, loved it, everybody loved it. I think the guy's name is John Lasseter. He was touring the world or something, like promoting the next movie or some other movie that came out from Pixar. So he comes back, and they had started working on Toy Story 2. And so they had merged with Disney at this point. And Disney was like, yeah, we know it's not up to par with Toy Story 1, but it's good enough. We just need to get this movie on the shelf and get it sold. So he came back, and all the guys kind of expressed like, yeah, we just don't think this is our best work. Like, we don't feel good about putting this out there. So he was just like, you know what, guys? Scrap it. They just like scrapped all of the production that they had done and all the storyboarding. It was like, we're starting over from scratch, and we're going to do this right. Like, to me, that says a lot. First, about quality and integrity. Secondly, like, these guys didn't care what the studio or what the audience thought to that degree. They wanted to make a good movie because they wanted to do it. I just remember watching the documentary, and they showed this guy, Lasseter, when he wanted to be the first one to make a full-length animated movie, which had never been done before. And so they finally got the funding, and somebody was in there with a camera. He's like, we're going to make a movie? Like, he was just like so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like this little kid. I was like, that is it. Like, that is what creative people should be like when somebody tells them, you're going to get to do what you like to do, and you're just like a giddy kid. Like, he gets it. And that's why I like Pixar. And they're just like Google and Facebook too, like the office environments, they're shooting Nerf guns and running around and being playful. It's like, how else are you going to be creative if you're not playful? And we're going to get into a whole section on that eventually.
It's sort of like bad perfectionism is like running away from or afraid of like failure, whereas good perfectionism is like based on hope, like that there could be something wonderful that you could achieve, like you're running to something instead of away from something.
So yeah, I guess I categorize that good perfectionism, the intrinsic, and the extrinsic is the bad perfectionism, always doing things. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. Because I do think there's this whole wrestling between the audience and the artist. So, like something I think Evan and Chatone were talking about last time, like, when is there poetry that I keep for myself, or when do I give it to people? And I think the ideal model is, God creating everything. It's like, he did it because he wanted to do it. But at the same time, it's pleasurable for us. It's not like it just sucks. It's not like, great, this creation you made, I'm so glad that you made it, and I can't stand it now. It's like, he made it with other people in mind, but it was completely still out of something that he wanted to do. So I think there's a way to balance, how do you interact with the audience where you're giving them, and I think it goes back to fear and love too. Because I remember a painter friend of mine was asking me, he's like, well, I'm a painter, but there's a market out there. And if the market wants something, like I have to put it out there. And I was like, well, yeah, there's a difference though. Like, are you driven by this, like, oh, if I don't make this, then nobody's going to like me and they're not going to receive what I do. Like, that's one thing. But there's this other thing that's like, I'm just so overflowing with love and passion for what I do. To please the audience in that way, I think is, like when you're overflowing with joy and love and pleasure and excitement and play and creativity and fun, and that just spills over into other people, I think in that way, you should be trying to please the audience. Not like, I want everybody to like me, they gotta like me. And that,
or I want to make money doing this, so
yeah.
in order to make money, I need to do X, Y, Z. When in actuality, if you're going to make money doing something you don't like doing, then you could probably do something more lucrative than being an artist.
That's good. I never thought of that. That's funny. That's a really good point.
Or you could just be doing something else that you don't like doing. You didn't have to stress, where you knew you were going to get that paycheck,
That's good. That's really good. So yeah, I think balancing the audience and the artist. I feel like I was going to say something else about that. All right, where to go from here? Let's see. So yeah, the last thing I kind of ended on that point was doing things because you're afraid of how people. Oh, okay. I know what else I was gonna say. So I always tell people my interpretation of the meaning of life. I say, okay, so everybody's gonna get to heaven, and there's gonna be somebody's gonna be like, okay, God, now that we're all here, what's the meaning of life? You can just let a cat out of the bag. Everything's done. Tell us. So there's gonna be all this quiet. He's like, why did you create Earth? Why did you do all creation? And he's gonna be like, oh, you wanna know why? Okay. Felt like it. That's my interpretation of the meaning of life. And I think, that's how we should be as artists. It's like, why did you do that? Because I had a desire. But in the world where we live, where there's always this need for extra explanation. Like, no, there's got to be something deeper behind. There's got to be more exposition of this. Like, I wanted to. So there's this woman named Dorothy Sayers. She has this book called The Mind of the Maker. And she has a similar thing. I thought it was funny. She said, people will read a book and then they'll find out that the author is doing like a book signing or a talk, and they're all excited because they're like, oh, great, I'm going to get into the mind of the author and I'm going to learn so much more about this, complexity behind this thing. And so they'll get to the author and be like, I want to know, what was the meaning of this book? And then the author is like, the book is what I meant. Like, that's it. There's no greater meaning than the thing itself. So I think that goes back to that intrinsic motivation. And I think people have a hard time with that. Like, you're saying God just creates stuff because he felt like him. Like, what else would he do? I mean, what other reason did he have to create stuff? He doesn't need anything.
He needs everything, so he has to be the reason.
So yeah, there's this one verse. There's like this couple times in the Old Testament says, God is in the heaven and he does as he pleases. And I just like that word because I think it could be taken both ways. One, in the omnipotent ways, like he does whatever he wants, no questions, autonomy, freedom, ability because he can. But then second, I just like the word pleases, how it can be pleasure or joy or what makes you feel good. It's like, why else? Why? I mean, I don't know, I guess people have a hard time of seeing God as like enjoying himself. So that's why when you say, oh yeah, God made creation because it was fun, people are like, what do you mean it was fun? He can't be doing that. He's got to run the universe. So, does as he pleases, or something else I just thought of, pleases, pleasure. It's in my head. It's right there. Yeah, people don't do things because they like it anymore. There's always got to be some kind of deeper intellectual. People can't. I remember even in architecture school, it was frustrating because sometimes you want to draw like a curve. All these box symmetrical buildings, like you want to draw some type of curve or some type of, something that just wasn't straight lines. And there would always have to be some mean, like if you did it and then they ask you, why did you draw this? Like you had to have some type of argument. You had to be able to stand your ground, like I did this because when people enter the building, I want them to feel this, and like you couldn't just say I like the way it looked. It always had to have this rational explanation, and that always irritated me. The fact that people wanted to make stuff more, like going back to the idea of design in the iPod, wherever this chart is. Like the Sony guy was saying about the DVD player, you know, the only thing that's going to set our DVD player apart from the other same-looking DVD players is design, that human touch. There's an architect named Gaudi, my friend Dion.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, you saw. That's right. You saw Sagrada. I was kind of jealous of that.
Oh, you should be jealous.
I love Gaudi. He's just.
He's a madman.
I know.
Really.
This dude was so okay. So Gaudi, my friend Dion, she studied him when we were in A school, and she said, you know, Gaudi was like, you don't see any of these straight lines in nature. Why are we drawing them in our own lives? We should be mimicking nature. So this dude was crazy. He built. He built he called his architecture osteomorphic architecture because it's all very bone-like. There was nothing that was just like rigid. So I remember reading something when I was writing a paper about him. They said this dude was so committed to the true proportions of nature that he would be hoisting cows up to the church so that they could have a replica, so they could plaster it. Like, okay, this is it.
The church is a replica. Like even the people that obviously are people, they're molded from real people.
So he said people were like suffocating up there because they were in the plaster. And it's like, okay, Gaudi, we understand the need for realism, but we're dying. You know?
Which is why, I mean, it's so intricate. They're not done with the building yet, 150 years later.
See, time. People willing to spend time. He wanted to make. He's like, look, I just want it done right. I'm not on the timetable of what you guys think. I want to make my architecture.
He wasn't the expense account of others either, which is they cost too much. But his buildings are probably some of the most amazing buildings I saw in the world.
I love Gaudi, and he was one of those like revolutionary guys too. They say he'd be sitting in class and just be bored. It's like, all right, I'm peacing out. Like he'd just be leaving class when teachers. He's like he was one of those Google guys. Like I know what I want to do, man. While I'm sitting up in the classroom listening to you guys, I got intrinsic motivation. I know where I want to go.
And that just goes to show you, people were, and so he only did buildings for people that obviously that could pay for them. So people wanted Gaudi to come do their new house, even though it costs a ridiculous amount of money. It's probably going to go over budget. It's going to take long, but nobody on the street was going to have a house like this. Anyway, nobody in the world has any architecture that looks like Gaudi.
One of a
Except for
kind.
the Cat in the Hat book, or like in Disneyland or something.
Yeah, man. So I just thought about doing stuff for fun. I don't understand how people can make art if it's not fun. Oh yeah, so I was talking about the pleases, the omnipotence, or the pleasure, joy kind of way. And it kind of relates to what I was saying last week about no one can tell you what to do in two senses of the phrase. You know, one, you are autonomous. No one has the ability to tell you what to do, just like nobody can tell God what to do. Like he's free. And then the other way, like literally no one can tell you what to do because you're the only one who has your brain. Like I can't tell Lori Jean, this is what your life is supposed to mean. How in the world can I know all of her thoughts and desires and dreams? And like the fact that I can't know your mind first is the first indication that I can't tell you what to do. The fact that I'm not inhabiting your consciousness and your outlook on the world. So that'll take us into some talk about autonomy. This is kind of I was trying to explain this to myself to see if it was clear. So we'll see where it goes. So taking the concept of God, we'll just look at this one little quadrant. All right, actually, sorry. this one. So I keep talking about this idea from the inside out. Like things have to be intrinsic and they have to flow from within to the outside. They can't be externally motivated. The only way I can explain this is, okay, when you're a little kid and you're trying to think of the concept of God, or even now, people think about God, all we can imagine is like black space, right? Like we don't really, like we can't really picture God. So the only picture we have is like God, and then we usually think about the idea of nothingness. Like where does God live and what is around him? But there is nothing outside of him. Like he just is all of existence. So the only way I can really try to explain it is this circle and call it this idea of self-contained. Like he is just within himself. There's no boundary outside of him where there's then space, because then that would be saying, oh, there's something that exists outside of God that he was unaware of, so he's really not God. So basically the whole concept of God is he just has to be in and of himself. Freestanding is the word I use. Freestanding, self-reliant, independent, free of need, self-sufficient. There can't be anything outside of him. And then on the other level, there can't be anything above him in a superiority kind of sense, because then that thing would be God, and you could go on forever and ever that thing would be God. So basically, if you're going to be God, you just are. And you yourself are this freestanding agent. So by definition, there can only be one God, similar to the way there can only be one you, individual, subjective human being. You can't duplicate God. So I'm saying all that to kind of get to, that's how we are too. Like in life, in art, in jobs, I think we should be mimicking that ultra sense of freedom where no one is reigning over us in a job place or in creativity. Like no one is telling us what to do. Like no one can expect of us because they have no superiority over us. So then, let me jump to this chart. To maybe make it more clear in less philosophical terms. So Dan Pink in Drive 2 is talking about how a lot of companies are going to what they call a flat work environment, where instead of its employee, supervisor, administrator, boss, CEO, it's more about one level playing field, like this fruit, where everybody comes to work and it's like, hey, you're the same as me and I'm the same as you, but I have something to offer to the company that you can, and vice versa. And I think that goes in line with how we're created to all be freestanding agents unto ourselves. That I can't control your life. You know, I can't tell you what to do. I can't force you to do anything. You are your own thing unto yourself. And I should treat you in that manner when it comes to work or creativity. I like what Pink says in the book. He says, you know, if you yourself have this feeling of freedom and autonomy, which you enjoy, of being able to move about and do what you like, why then would you inhibit someone else's same autonomy to be free? And I like the word he used, self-directed. I think that's such a good word. We all desire to be self-directed. We all desire to have, like I said, our own little God universe, like in this chart. Let's see. So there.
So how does authority fit into that?
Glad you asked. So I think, okay, so here's how I think authority works. I think, it's good, I'll use BAM. So, okay, here's the idea of a movie director. I used to, after I've thought more of this idea about autonomy and self-governance and self-directed, I was thinking when I was writing about creativity and how the whole paradigm of a movie director is like sitting in the chair, action, cut, you move, you do this, you go, you, over here. It's very authoritative. But then one time I was on a film set with some kids at Lighthouse, and there was this actor, and he was, like, I was getting very annoyed, because I just wanted to get the movie done. I was like, come on, man, I'm the director. Let's go, cut, you move, we got to film these scenes, we only got 2 hours, you up here. But he was, like, offering suggestions. He's like, I got this jacket. What do you think about this look? Like, I got this scarf. What do you think about this hat? And I was just like, who cares, man? We're the director. We're going to tell you what to wear, and we're going to make the movie and get on with it. I was just so annoyed, but then I stopped for a second. I was like, wow. Actors actually have something to say. Like, they actually want to contribute. Like, I never really thought of actors as collaborators. I'd always thought of them as my little pieces of the chess board to do what I wanted them to do. And so then I was like, man, I could be missing out. I was like, I could be missing out because I put myself in his shoes. I was like, what if I was an actor and I came on somebody's film set? I know I would think in my head, like, wow, these guys probably should ask me because I have a lot of good ideas of what could be done. So then it shifted my whole mentality of not being a director with the megaphone and you do this, but seeing myself more as a guider of free beings. Like, everybody has something to contribute to this project that I could never do. And rather than being like, this is what, like, I still think there's a sense if you're the director, you're like, okay, this is the vision and this is where we want to go. And I'm setting out the plan and the purpose and we need to get here. But it's not a controlling, like it's more like, okay, guys, like, you come this way. Like, yeah, we could go that way, but I really think we need to go. I think it's more about guiding, like guiding with wisdom. Because I know you're probably thinking, like, when I first thought about this too, but Dorothy Sayers, she had this interesting thing in that same book, Mind of the Maker, where she said, you know, when somebody's writing a play, there's a point where they want their characters to be free of them. Just like, no longer am I the authoring, but they've sort of taken on a life of their own. So she was saying that's how God is with our life. Like, he kind of wrote our lives and was like, okay, you guys go, be me, you know, do what I do. And I don't need to tell you what to do. Like, I put it within you because you're like me to be self-directed. And so I think the difference is it out of fear or is it out of love? Like, if you're out of fear, you're going to be controlled. No, don't do that. I mean, that's where free will comes into play. Like, if it was out of fear, you're like, no, I got to make you do this. No, don't do this. No, stop doing. Like, what's the point of free will if we're not going to get to use it? So I think a true creator, director, God operates out of love, where he's like, okay, here's choices. Please make these choices. Please make these choices because these are the best. I'm not going to make you make those choices, but I'm telling you, if you want to be smart, do this. But yes, you can make any choice you want, but I'm trying to guide you. So I think it's about...
It's also sort of like a servant king, I guess. Because
Yeah.
I personally don't like the idea of authority, except for God's authority. But I do want to reconcile it with, because I agree more with like your general concept, but I feel like I know that in the Bible there is this concept of authority even in the human realm, and so like how do we reconcile that? And I guess I think of it as like, the only way I've ever been able to reconcile it is like, well, if we are in a leadership position or a position of authority, it's like as a servant.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's how Jesus demonstrated he was a servant king, so we should be. I
And
don't know.
I'm sure he may talk a little bit about this in Drive, or perhaps later in this book, about how to, and Bernard's, we talk about here, like how to motivate people.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily, it's giving them that leeway, you know.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first weeks of my job, it's like 5 years ago, my director, who's been like in the profession for like 30 years, he was like, hey guys, what do you think about this? And everybody said something. But this is like my second week, so I didn't say anything. And then he turned to me and he's like, well, what do you think, Ebony? And I was like, oh God. You know, but yes, I like the idea of he's going to have to make the ultimate decision, but he consults with people
Yeah.
that he has way more wisdom experience over because they may bring something else in the table. And so he doesn't, unless it's something that he has to make, most things that, you know, decisions he has to make, that involve, you know, other employees, he was like, I won't make that unless you give me a recommendation
That's awesome.
for that. And so I really appreciated sort of having that kind of boss and supervisor who says, like, you all have something to contribute. You know, it's your job. I want you to bring that. to the table, and there's something else that's mildly related to your job that you want to do, come to me. You know, because I want this to be an exciting work environment. I want this place. I think that it's just empowering people.
Yeah.
Or letting go of some of that power. So you hire them, you know, they're creative to do what you want to do. Bring it back to me. I'll give you some criticism on it, but this is not my project. Like, this is your thing. And I think that's when people thrive, when they know, oh wow, I can really create something that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Me.
So,
See, that makes me think of a lot of stuff, like both of you. Like what you're just saying, it goes back to the Google 20% times. Like people want that autonomy. It's like you give them the leeway. It's like, thank you. Like this is what I've been waiting to do. It's like you don't have to motivate them. Like they're already motivated. And it's funny, I was watching this great TED Talks that we'll watch eventually in here. But this guy was talking, he's in Bulgaria, and he's like, how people need to play more. He's like, this is why we're number 20 out of the world. And he said,
they're serious over there, huh?
That's what he said. He said, there's too much seriousness. He's like, we need to play. He's like, this is ridiculous. But he said, what you just said, he said, we hired you to do the job. Why don't we give you the freedom to also, you know, create and do things on your own? Like, we trust you enough to give you the job and not to let you do it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think I bought this book at the Gordon Avenue book sale, which I haven't read yet, but just the title was very interesting. It was called Autonomy and Interference, like a guide to parenting. And I thought that was very fascinating. It's like, yeah, how do you deal with kids and letting them do what they want to do, but at the same time be like, okay, we probably should make these choices. Yeah.
right.
And I think
It's a big question mark for me.
I think part of it too is realizing that, yeah, we're about to wrap up, realizing that, and we'll go deeper into this later, but that children too are made in the image of God. So we can't like disqualify them, like, oh, you don't have autonomy yet. You'll get autonomous when you're 18. It's like, no, little kids are probably the most autonomous. I want to go over here. I want to go over here. I want to do this. I want to be free. It's like, yeah, you got to guide that too. I'm like, okay, not the street, not the street, not the street, not the street, not the street. Play here. So there is authority, but I think it's the motivation, because like you're saying, the whole servant king attitude. It's like he doesn't need it. Like he doesn't need your obedience. He's completely like, do what you want. You're going to screw it up if you make that decision. Not that he doesn't care, like he wants you to make the best one, but it's like it's not affecting his.
Your obedience is for you.
Yes.
Not for him.
And I think what you were saying, like I hadn't got to, but the idea of what you said made me think of this. Like fearlessness, like knowing yourself. I talk about this concept all the time, but it's what you said that made me think of it. I'm trying to connect it. Knowledge of self. Oh yeah. Most of the time, as human beings, our desire to control stuff is because of insecurity. Like we like to control because it makes us feel good. Whereas God is like, I'm in control. I already know who I am. Like I don't need to feel good. Like I'm doing this for you. So the authority, that's why I say the authority is out of love, because he doesn't need to control your life. He didn't need to make you to begin with. So I think if ever he's in authority, it's always in the sense of, like I said, I'm doing this for you. Like I'm in authority, not because I want to be, not because I have an ego trip. Like I'm just the first thing that exists, so I kind of have to be. Like I'm just, the responsibility weighs on me. Something else made me think of.
Talk about fearlessness.
Fearlessness. We're going to talk about that. There was something else you guys just said. Oh yeah, your thing about your boss being like, oh, what do you guys think? Like humility. Like the fact that God is all wise and all infinite, but he's like, I want to make people just like me who can contribute. Even though I don't need to, I want to make them. Like my friend Doug said this thing too. We were in this other small group, and he said you're gonna get your mind blown when you get to heaven, and God says, hey, Ebony, how do you think we should make this new thing? And then he's like, all right, make it like she says it. You know, like that whole idea that he's so willing to co-create, like something Richard had brought up that I had talked to him, like the idea of co-creation. It's like he's not, like in order for love to happen, like you have to be on the same plane. It can't be authority, employee. So I think that goes to that flat work environment. God is, even though he is up here by definition and truth, like in heart, he's like, he wants to be here. So I think the idea of co-creation, you know, like you were asking questions last time, like, I think there's a sense of like, yeah, I'm all, there's times when I'm going to know what I'm supposed to do, and there's other times where he's like, yeah, Ebony, you do. What do you want to do? Like, I was listening to a guy.
That was so freeing. I think it completely changed whatever the situation was talking about last week, because I was like, well, I just really don't. I feel like I'm always scared of making mistakes. But then if you flip it of like, you know, God is giving you, you know, autonomy and the sort of authority over your life realm. And one, he has authority over the whole universe, so he's not afraid of you making a mistake. The universe is not going to fall apart if you do something wrong. So it's sort of freedom in that, but just freedom of like, not even sort of humbly, like I can make a decision, be it right if it's, you know, there isn't necessarily a mistake, but just risk and a path that you decide to take. And so I just got more freedom of like, you know, I don't really have to worry about, life is not a chess game where I'm like, okay, this move, then this, oh my gosh, they're going to take all my men. You know, like, oh my gosh, wrong move, I lost the game. But there was just this freedom of like, this is a journey, we're creating, you know, my future. Even though it's already written, I feel like I have a part in that, creating that future together. And even my mistakes, he has covered. For my, you know, in his realm, it's not necessarily even a mistake, but just another, you know, turn here and there, and there's always some learning or whatever. Not so. And it was just a freedom of like, yeah, I don't have to, like you, like I don't have to have control over it all, so it makes sense in my mind, and I know what's going to happen. Because even, I mean, that's an illusion.
Yeah, and like you were saying, something Dan, have you met Daniel? Or Dan, he was here last time. But it's interesting the way, like, he reads all this theology and philosophy, and the way he's able to see stuff is very interesting. So the whole idea of being, he said this, which I had never seen in this light. He said, being a servant actually means you're the freest person. Because you think about it, if you're in control of everything, you're like, I'm keeping up with this, I got this guy. But if you're a servant, it's kind of shown the fact that you are so free that you are free enough to make yourself subject to someone else, which seems very counterintuitive. It's like, wait a minute. So he uses ideas like, oh, say you cut off your arm. He's like, oh, you just limited yourself. It's like, yeah, but I chose to do that. Like, that's how free I am, is that I cut off my own arm. Like, it wasn't forced upon me. So that, the whole idea of being a servant,
like,
you know, we think it's the opposite. Like, no, I want to be in control. I want to be the big dog. It's like, okay, you want to be the big dog? Take care of this. It's like, oh, I got to take care of stuff? Whereas you're the servant, it's like, you know, you are free because you made yourself. So that's, I'll wrap up with these last few things. But something you were saying, oh yeah, so the co-creation idea, I had a friend who, we had this long talk one night, and we were talking about, he was saying, you know, he said he feels like that's how God is, just like the guy who just comes along and says, hey, what are you guys working on? Creative, oh, that's cool, can I, like, he's not trying to be in charge of it, he just likes the idea of creating. Or it makes me think of the idea I've been using a lot lately with people is like, take David Beckham and then a little league soccer player. Like, David Beckham doesn't come up to the little kid and like, stupid little kid trying to play soccer. Man, get out. Like, he loves soccer and he loves showing soccer to the kid, and the kid loves learning. Like, he wants to be like the dad, and the dad wants to be like the kid, you know. So it's just that idea of, it's not the height of authority, it's about the shared connection. You know, the two people who love soccer, doesn't matter what age, they come together on that connection. So if you're a god and you're a human, the fact that you love creativity brings you together, and one is not looking at the other like, look what this girl's creating. So then that kind of segue into the...
Listen, let me put this chair back.
All right.
I gotta meet somebody at 9:30.
So I had this one revolutionary idea that made my brain kind of explode this year, and it's this idea of a true creator would never create inferior to him or herself. So, I was thinking about how as human beings we've created computers. I can pick up a guitar, I play a strum, I record it on the computer, I hit play, it plays it, I listen, done. But one thing that the computer cannot do which is the simplest human response, is to say, I like that, I don't like that. Now, enter some human being who has no intelligence about music, maybe don't even have intelligence, period. I'm up here, I'm a musical genius, and this guy says, I like that song. To me, that is like light years above the computer for that simple fact that he can relate. So, a true creator would not create anything less than himself because, one, okay, who of us has ever made a painting and said, oh, I can't wait for people to see how inferior that painting is to me because when they look at it, they're going to be like, yeah, that person is the bomb. Like, no, you make the painting as equal with value as you possibly can to yourself. So when people see it, they're like, that painting is amazing. Where's that person? Oh, I saw your painting. I see you. I want to, like, none of us would ever do that. So why would the best creator in the world make something lower grade to then point to himself? He's only going to give himself the best value. The only reason we would make, like if we were the creator and we made the universe, we would, like I said, we would control people because we're insecure. We're like, oh yeah, I got to rule over people.
Yeah.
Whereas he's like, no, I want stuff to be as equal as value to me. So from the other perspective, it's like if you were to give yourself a gift, you would go to the store, who would go to the bargain bin? If somebody said, go to the store and pick out whatever you want. Nobody's going to go to the bargain bin. They're going to pick.
Not unless I had to pay for it.
No, they're saying for free. All right, pizza. So you're either going to pick out the most expensive item or the thing that means the most to you. Like you're not going to select something for yourself that is of, even though it's a material object, like that's all we have to value, you know, to make the metaphor. You're going to pick out the thing that you're like, I deserve the best. I want the best. Give me the best. So I think that's how God was when he created human beings. He's like, what do I deserve? I'm the best. I deserve the best. I'm only going to make the best. I'm not going to give myself a lower quality gift than what I deserve. So in that sense, we're not inferior to God. Like he sees us like he sees himself. Because like he has no ego trip. He's not like, oh, I need to be above these human beings. Look how secure. He's like, no, I'm secure from the beginning. Like I know who I am from the start. The fact that I made you is to give you enjoyment. So I was going to say the last thing to Ebony, but she left, but I'll say it anyway. Is that confusing?
No.
All right.
I just don't know if I agree, but it's an interesting idea.
All right. So.
And you don't care whether I agree.
No.
Because you made the idea for yourself.
Exactly. So the last thing I'll end with, I think is the last thing. Yes, co-creation, yes. So Ebony's thing, she should listen to the MP3. But well, when she was talking about how it freed her, I thought this would free her as well. I was watching something on TV, and this guy was like, you know, when New Year's was ringing, and I was like, okay, God, you know, it's a new year, you know, fresh start. Like, what do you want to do this year? And he said, I heard back an answer that I had never expected. He said, God said to me, he's like, what do you want to do this year? And he was just like the freedom and the like. He said, a God who has infinite variety, that he could even let the people who are on earth decide what to do. He's like, that just, like when I heard that too, it made me say like, yeah, what do I want to do? Because I think especially as Christians, we're often feel like we're confined to like this Christian duty, you know, like you're not allowed to do the things that are the desires of your heart. Like everything is like this Christian, like everything has to have a Christian tag attached to it in order for you to be free to do it. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, not evangelist. Oh, I'm not allowed to do this, not religious. Like why would he give you these desires and unique attributes for you to do the opposite? Like that doesn't even make sense for him to say like, here's all your desires and passions and goals. Now go this way in the complete opposite direction. Like he wouldn't do that. He's like, I'm in heaven, I do as I please. He's like, think about God when he ever has done something that he didn't want to do. Like he doesn't do things out of obligation. He does them out of love, desire, freedom, choice, because he can, because he wants to.
Does that depend on what it is as well?
Like, go ahead, say it.
Like, as far as like living the Christian life, being free to do what you want to do compared to what is considered Christian to do, like I think it kind of like depends. Like for an example, if your goal and passion is to become, I don't know, a dancer,
Mm-hmm.
then I guess the wholesome path would be to, I don't know, do like dance in the church or something, or I don't know,
Interpretive
be a
dance.
ballet dancer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to like, I don't know, being a dancer at a strip club.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think, too, because, I mean, I think if we go back to the last week, because, I mean, yeah, where I was trying to go tonight, which I didn't get to finish, is the idea of identity, like how you see yourself. And I think if there was a girl who wanted to be a dancer and she saw herself as like these masterpiece, like, wow, I'm the only, like, once you felt that sense of love, like, your self-confidence would be such where you would never think about going that path.
Right.
Like, the idea of knowing how valuable you are and loved would help direct those things. Like, wait a minute, why would I be going, like, doesn't even make, it's like, it's like you see some of these people like Prince Harry and Prince William, like, aren't they royalty? Like, why are they, like, it's like they don't understand that they're royalty in one sense. Like, you see them in the news all the time. It's like, you're a prince. Like, why are you in the tabloids? It's like, person who had an identity of what royalty was. Like, back in the day, royalty, like, they wouldn't even let kings and queens, I mean, just every little thing is taken care of. Oh, yes, my lord. Like, no, don't let them get dirty. Don't let them, like, nowadays you can be in the tabloid. But I think, yeah, I mean, what you're saying is true. I think a lot of it goes to just self-identity, too. Because, yeah, if you just say, be free, people are like, okay, I'll be free. But you have to understand, like, freedom for us as people, human beings, does have boundaries, which we don't like to hear because it doesn't sound free. But I think you have to look at freedom through the idea, the lens that human beings do have physical boundaries. So if I want to go 100 miles an hour in a car in a 25 mile an hour zone, I can be free, and I'll be free for maybe like 10 minutes. But then once I crash and become, paralyzed, my freedom just now made me unfree. People want to be so free that they do drugs to the end of the world until they're addicted to drugs. Like, that freedom of doing the drugs has now trapped them. So it's like, if you're doing things that are trapping you, it's really not. So there are boundaries.
Yeah, such as like karma or spiritual laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's also a sin too, like, if God says to you, like, well, what do you want to do? It's got to be within, like, what is good or not. And it's not, I think we say, like, within what is good as if that's the limiting.
Yeah.
But really, the bad stuff is what's limiting. Really, the good is, like, this infinite expanse of godliness that is.
That's a good way to look at it.
And I'm thinking, Bernard, because I love my kids, and I'm working right now on curriculum design, and so this is really inspiring. Because to me, that's like a type of art too, like how to work with my kids and teach them things in a way that's gonna like really impact their life for the good. Like to me, that's art. But and I was thinking, like, how do I give this to them where it's like this open, like you have this autonomy, like let's pull that out of you and like pull your good desires out of you, like draw that out. Because it's somewhere in you, like for them to be creative and come to their own conclusions and, but good conclusions. Sort of like what you're saying about the authority. How can I be like a servant king to these kids? And because I have some authority, but which I sort of hate. But so how can I do it right? And I was thinking too, like, okay, so what I want is to create a space that, like, kids need structure too. Or they, like your experience with that kid where you're like, you can do whatever you want, and they're like, so anyway, that's inspiring me to think, like, what type of structure can I create that is just so, like, that allows them to be autonomous, and creative and do what they want in this space that is going to be safe for them. That has enough structure that they have some sense of direction, some sense of like safety, but that they can just go with it and be inspired. Because I see them like clamping down all day in school. Yeah. When they come to me, they expect the same thing, and it's like, how do I break them out of that, but like still have some structure for them to be healthy,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't have the answer yet, but I'm going to be working on it this week.
That's good.
It's very inspiring.
Yeah, it's like it's funny, like I never thought I'd probably say this, but just recently I have been realize once you start getting your brain in focus with the truth, like you start to see things clear. So now I'm realizing how loving structures and rules and boundaries are because I'm like, wow, this safety sign is not here to stop me, but it's here to actually support my fun. It's like we want you to be safe, not because we want to stop you from doing stuff, because we want to keep you alive, to keep you to continue to do stuff. Like we love you, like people who like. That's why I say, it's not against scientists or analytical people because those people love us in a different way. Like they study the bridges and the structures because they want us to be alive to enjoy life. They study asteroids because they don't want it to hit the Earth. Like if we can avoid it, if we can, figure out a way to deflect it or whatever. Like they're there to love us in that way. It doesn't seem like it because it seems boring. Like rules, but it's like it's like that whole new mind. The balance of structure and flexibility. Like so, yeah, I know which. It's one that's hard. I was just writing about that this week because I did that camp I did last week, where the guy who was in charge, like I felt kind of stifled. He's like, "Don't just let the kids make the film. Like you got to make sure it gets completed." And I was like, "But aren't they supposed to have fun? Like if we're just like making the film, like they're like, what fun is that?" But there was this other element, which I'm still not sure I completely agree. But there was this other element of like, well, when they're done at the end of the week, like they want to have something to show for it. So they can be like, hey, we did this and we completed, we felt like we did something.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was this tension because he was like, yeah, make sure they do this. But the other counselors who were there with the kids were like, it's just a kid's movie. So I was getting pulled in both directions. Like they wanted just to have fun, but he wants it to get done. Like somehow they merge.
Right. And what does it mean to have a completed film? Like it might look different for them. Like,
yeah, because they've never done a film before in their
right.
life. So
they can still leave with this completed project that they're proud of. That's the best for them right now.
Yeah.
And like later they can compete with themselves.
Yeah, and I think it goes a lot to insecurity too, because it's probably some sense of like, well, we have to look good for the people, so they'll bring us back. There's always insecurity, and I think something we'll get into later too is like parents. Their insecurity of their children being artists has a lot to do with their own insecurity. Like, oh, what are we gonna tell our friends when we tell them you're a dancer in Broadway? Like, like they, oh, she's not a doctor, a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Like they like to be able to, it's parents. And I think it's just a cycle because parents, generation after generation, like they didn't do what they wanted to do because their parents expected them to do this, and so they never did what they wanted to do. So they're trying to live vicariously, like, yeah, my daughter's a doctor. It's more about their fear than theirs. Like, oh, honey, we just want you to eat, and it's like, yeah, you just want to be able to tell Pastor Bob that I'm a doctor, and you can go, oh yeah. There's lots of insecurity. Once we eradicate insecurity, fearlessness, it's just. We have to have fearlessness.
Do you have any kids?
No, I'm not even married.
Do you have kids?
Not married.
Um,
Do you?
no, not married.
Let's start a new club.
I'm married. Maybe adopt. My parents were actually really, really good about that. Like the fact that my sister is this like amazingly successful and really rich realtor, and she's a mom, and I'm going the path of like never gonna be rich, work for a nonprofit, like a little bit of a flaky artist, like probably never gonna probably never gonna have kids, which my sister is very distraught about. Who's her kids named cousins, but anyway, like it's amazing that my parents they've done a good job. I have to say, like. They've never pressured either of us to be what we're not, I think, which is cool. Sometimes they didn't maybe push us enough. Like, I quit a lot of stuff in school that I actually probably would have been happy if I kept doing it, but, so there are different levels. But I have to say, like, I'm pretty proud of my parents for not trying to be like, don't do nonprofit, that's a waste of time. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think, there's so much. I mean, once your parents see, like, oh, wow, she's made in the image of God, I need to, like, respect that.
Right.
That's like, then they can allow you to be what you're supposed to be. Because, like, they would never want somebody to come along and be like, oh, you shouldn't have children. You should just do what other people do. They were like, what is your problem? Like, who are you trying to direct my life? But then they do it themselves. Because, like, the authority thing, like you're saying, it's like, there's authority, but I think the authority is there to be like supposed to mimic his authority. He's like, hey, I made everything, and you don't see me controlling you. Only time I give you rules is for, like I said, the boundaries. Like, don't go off the edge of that. You will die. I don't want you to die. I want you to live.
Right.
It's like, I put before you death and life. Choose the life. It's like, I'm giving you the answers. In a world where people love answer, here's the answer. Choose this one. Yeah. Well, we're going to get into all that stuff.